let the fans know what it really is. I will fuck Terence Crawford up. As a matter of fact, just to let you know how serious I am, I already got off the phone with Al a couple days ago, and we in negotiations right now. To the fans who don't know, we definitely reached out to Bud and them, and we just waiting on back for a response. So this shit going down on my end, baby. You know what I'm saying? All the suckers in the little. I can't believe. I always kind of knew you was in the bitch in the fake motherfuckers organization, man. Him, Terence Crawford, Mark Davis, everybody talking about Lomachenko. Lomachenko punk ass don't want to see me. And Dynamite, they got motherfucking, they appointing people. You know what I'm saying? They want motherfuckers to be as fake as the next person.
Those are the words of Gary Russell Jr. as he lashes out at Jaleel Hackett, and he verifies and that he is in negotiations with Terence Crawford. Of course, we know as maybe about 3 weeks ago, Gary Russell shared on social media that he did something strange to Terence Crawford. And a lot of stories that supported that were different. You know, I think what happens when a person explains certain things, it's always their perception of what they see happen. You know, according to Gary Russell Jr., you know, he sent Terence Bud Crawford to the hospital. We heard broken jaws or something, you know, that was fractured or something, you know, something along that nature, right? We heard those things from Gary Russell. You know, Terence Crawford had his side, and then Dynamite, and then Mark, he also had his on perception. And I think when you put them all together, I think it was maybe a little exaggeration on Gary Russell's part, maybe. However, that's not important. What's important is what happened. Where's the silver lining? What did all these seeds grow for what? Contract negotiations, right? So Al Heyman, he said he got off the phone with Al Heyman, and Al Heyman is actually siding with this, dealing with Top Rank in Terence Crawford's people. So you know what this tells me counterpunching Gary Russell Jr. Gary Russell Jr., I think, is fearless. I think he's frustrated because he's been denied. I see Gary Russell similar to a pretty boy Floyd Mayweather without the one loss of Lomachenko, without Lomachenko fight, because they did the same thing to Floyd. Floyd couldn't get fights like that. Gary Russell Jr. is wanting these type of fights, like Leo Santa Cruz. You give it to Gervonta Tank Davis, which is a lot bigger than Gary Russell Jr., so Gary Russell Jr. moves up. He spilled the beans on Al Heyman that he couldn't get fights, so fine. He got banished, or he got punished, rather, and he couldn't get the fights that he wanted, like the Leo Santa Cruzes and all that, right? He didn't play ball. He exposed the PBC and Fox, those fighters over there with Al Heyman, just a bit. But I think because of that, and because he couldn't get fights, he needs someone to fight, because this guy isn't getting any younger. This guy is one of the fastest boxers around right now. He's one mean, fearless son of a bitch. He is. And I think he has a major chip on his shoulder because of all that. I think it's pent-up frustration. It's not necessarily like Jamal Charlo. He's a little bit more calm. But you can tell he's a serious dude, and I think he means what he says. So if Terence Crawford fights him, it's one of those fights that Terence Crawford has to win. Why? Because there's already rumors behind it. Okay? This is a smaller guy also. Okay? So would it benefit him fighting Gary Russell Jr.? Well, he's a WBO welterweight champion. And Gary Russell Jr. is so competitive to the point he will be pissed off, and he's pissed off at Jaleel Hackett for doubting him or doubting his ability to go up and fight Terence Crawford. That's what he's pissed at him about. Called him a bitch and everything. I mean, this is what it is. So, you know, it's one thing, and it can be frustrating to say what a man can't do, you know. And I think that's the problem with Gary Russell Jr. And he was totally felt disrespected, and he told people what he thought. However, the negotiations are in. I don't know if Bud is really even considering that or taking it seriously, but we will see. You guys tell me what you think about Gary Russell Jr. in negotiations with Terence Bud Crawford. Of course, please subscribe. You guys be Counterpunch. Peace.